Hi, everyone. Alan McLaren here. I'm your host of the STRATA podcast, STRATA Originals podcast. And I'm so excited to have can I say I love a guy? I guess I can. I just did. I love this man, Brian Burkhart out of California. So he's my dude from California. But I want to start out by just telling you a little bit about our purpose because purpose really matters to this guy. And we're working through our purpose. So I know I'm going to get a lot of feedback from Brian when we're done. But here's what I've got so far. At Strata Originals, we exist to inspire executives to tell their stories to have an impact on others. So that's our starting point for purpose. We're going to work through that, but you'll see why in a moment. Now, how do I describe a man who is a words and communications ninja? I couldn't do it by just reading his bio, so I went to one of his customers. And one of his customers said, Brian Burkhart is a ridiculously talented speaker, presenter, and TEDx coach. It is no doubt the best in capital letters, and helping others find their voice and use it on stage and beyond. His goal is to empower his clients to exceed their own expectations. I can't do any better intro than what she did. But he is the founder and chief word guy of Square Planet. He is an author of a book called Stand for Something, The Power of Building a Brand That People Authentically Love, which is an Amazon #1 bestseller. And I've read it, and it is very consistent with what we're doing at Strata Originals. And he's also the host of Square Stories podcast, a bi-monthly expose of the most fascinating people in business today. And I was one of the fascinating people on his thing, so I was so honored to do that. And he's also a lecturer at Northwestern in Chicago. And his purpose, and we're going to get into that today, it's really simple. Elevate people. That's it. Welcome to Strata Originals, Brian.
Alan, it is so okay to say I love you because I do. I love you. It's real. Those emotions aren't just words. It's true. I think the reason you are on Square Stories is because you are such a great human being with a story worth sharing. And I am super honored and pleased to be on your podcast. I do have a question, however, is that quote, it was great, but I don't know who said it or where it was. I'm impressed.
On your website. So I did a little research like you do.
That's on my website?
Yeah, believe it or not. I'll go find it for you. But
Okay.
I read it. I went, it is exactly who you are. So it's always better to have someone else describe you than us to describe ourselves. So I think she did an amazing job. So yeah, it's already there. Now we're going to start with a fun little icebreaker for you. Ready?
Okay, let's do it. Yeah.
Finish this sentence. I am at my true self when I am.
I am at my true self when I am around like-minded, curious, growth-minded human beings who see the world as an incredible place where love should dominate hate.
I think we should plaster that on every billboard in America and Canada and the world. So I'm with you on that one. So
all right, cool. Let's do that.
Well, let's talk about thank you for sharing that. And I think you are an embodiment of that. And as we talk, we kind of had some fun with the love word, but I think it's how we live our lives. And I think that's
actually, when I have a podcast, it's an old one now. It's before Square Stories. Mm-hmm. It was called Maximizing Opportunities. And the guy that was my co-host was a designer who worked for me. And at one point, it's been years, like decade. And I said, Derek, I love you, man. And he's like, I love you too. And then we actually talked about the notion of love in the workplace and certainly even love between people of the same gender and how it can get just conflated with all kinds of yucky things. But really, love is about a deeper set of values and caring and pulling for each other and having each other's back and trust and security and all these things. Shouldn't we have those in the workplace? Shouldn't we be able to say that guy to guy, friend to friend? I have no problem with the notion of saying to a pal like you, I love you. I actually had a text exchange yesterday with one of my guys that said, I love you. And it's okay. It's okay. There's nothing wrong with that.
That's fantastic. Thank you. But I want to explore how you got to where you are. Our theme at Strata Originals is to find originals and find how the story got to where you are today. So tell me about the journey that got you to your passion.
I'll take you back a ways, a number of decades. I was 10 and I was going to run for student council president of Oak Ridge Elementary School, typical middle class, nothing special grade school in the suburbs of Chicago. And I was in 5th grade, and my best friend, still great human being, I was best man at his wedding. His name is Jim Leonard. Jim was going to be my vice president, and we had to do a speech in front of the whole school. And I remember in that moment, and I have a great picture of it actually, of me behind the lectern, and I was tiny. I'm still tiny. I pull the mic all the way down. You hear it. And as I'm giving this speech to my schoolmates, Alan, I knew right then and there that I was going to win in the moment. I knew I was going to get essentially all but 2 votes. And it was the 2 ladies that I was running against. And that actually happened. Jim and I won in a complete landslide. And in that moment, I knew I was going to win, not because I was something so special, but because for the first time in my life as a 10-year-old, I knew the power of communication. I was not a spectacular student or an amazing athlete or an incredible artist or this unbelievably popular kid. I was just one of many. But when I had the microphone and the school's rapt attention because of my ability to communicate, unlike others, everything changed. And right then and there, it put me on a very interesting and circuitous route to where I am today. It wasn't necessarily purposeful, but I eventually got back to it. Took a while, but I knew early. And, I look back and think, that's pretty cool stories. I'm very fond of that moment.
So it sounds kind of really interesting because you hadn't any formal training at that point. You were 10.
Correct.
Was it DNA? Was it an influence you had, or was it something more spiritual?
I would tell you that I'm not sure I was even good. I just know that at that time I was better than the others. And I think it was probably just a little bit of bravado, perhaps false bravado, but I was able to deliver a message in an interesting way that pulled the attention of the schoolmates. And so talent wasn't necessarily formed at that point, but understanding was. I certainly know that as I've gotten older and very much a student of the art and science of really great communication, my skill set has dramatically improved. I'm to the point now, this happens with actually a little bit too much regularity, where I am on stage delivering a keynote, and I am speaking, and I'm doing my content, and out a second hemisphere of my brain perhaps is thinking, okay, how's the audience doing? Where are you standing? I mean, like, I'm going through all of the things I coach in real time. It's almost like this duality exists. And so, yeah, back then I was just a kid. Today, it's definitely something I'm feeling a lot more like a craftsperson.
So how did you develop, because it is a craft.
Oh, yeah.
It is a craft. It is a skill. How did you develop from that 10-year-old confident brain to the expert that you are today? How did that transition?
It's a long, twisted tale. I'll give you a couple. I don't even know if you know this about me. When I was 20, I was still very much in college. I had an internship at Disney World down in Florida. I drove the submarines at 20,000 leagues under the sea, a ride that no longer exists because of Ariel, that little, it was based on a Jules Verne book called 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And that training was really something. It was an incredible moment that defined a lot of both my company's values, but certainly me as a human being, but very much my communication style. And I'll truncate it with the notion that essentially the training we had at Disney was along the lines of, you might have been in this boat, this fake submarine, for 10 hours today. And sure, it's going to be crazy hot and humid outside, and the long line of people continues to come, but they deserve your very best. You owe it to them to provide the best performance you possibly can. They paid real money. It may be their first time, even if it's your 5,000th time, you've got to do your best. And that was trained in a way that was unrelenting and important, and boy, did it stick. And now I can look back at it with a little bit more of a cerebral lens. What they were saying was, your audience matters most. And that is such a ridiculously important thought. It goes way beyond communicating on stage or in a podcast. To me, it's essentially what life looks like. the selfishness and the greed that we see on display on such a regular basis, I believe, are the most destructive forces on the planet. And when you look at it from the counter of giving, of taking care of others, of loving on other people, of putting them first, everything is uplifted. Everything is better. And there's only a billion examples. Mm-hmm. And so for me, where I really think my growth as a presenter really got fueled was as a 20-year-old who had some skills, was put to the test on a regular basis, hours at a time in the hot searing sun at Disney World. But then as an adult in business, going, when I connected the dots of what they were saying, what I did, and then I saw it in the world, that's where it happened.
And so when did you go from, so I'm taking the journey from the 10-year-old to the experience at Disney, and then today, your first speaking gig. Tell me about your first speaking gig. What was that like for you? Outside of the 10-year, your first.
I'll take you to, I'm going to give you a story before my first speaking gig. So I started really the majority of my early career, I was a producer. I'm still a producer, but I was very much behind the scenes, behind the camera. You didn't hear or see from me. And I was doing a video-based project for General Motors, just a small little company, and we're at their headquarters in Detroit. And I'm in the corporate boardroom as a 27-year-old who's going to interview at the time, the chairman and CEO, a guy named Rick Wagoner, for this corporate piece. And it was for one of the divisions, actually. It was a publishing arm that GM owned. And we've got all of our sound and lights and all the gear and camera guys and stuff. And there's a team of people who come in with Mr. Wagoner. And I'm 27. I'm a kid, right? And I look pretty youthful. At 27, I looked really youthful. And I sit across from him, and I've been given sort of this is the paradigm we follow. This is how it works. And Rick did his thing, and it was not great. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of leaned over to him, or leaned in. We were across from each other. And in real time, without having anything in advance, it wasn't like I prepared it. I said, well, what if you tried it like this? And I just sort of regurgitated the ethos of his statement, but in a far more compelling way, using a model that I know now. I didn't really know at the time. It was kind of by instinct. And he's like, I could do that. And he rips it off. And you could just see all the eyes in the room like, wow, was that better? And he just kind of made this little look. He looked over at this internal communications person, just kind of gave him a glance and sort of pointed at me, pointed back and said, just sort of, it was all this little finger waggle. And I was in. I got blessed by Rick Wagoner, GM. That was the moment where it was like, I'm pretty good at this. And I had kind of known that I had a skill, but I didn't really know what I had. And then somehow, some way, getting validation from him changed everything. But when I then realized is I didn't have anything to back it up. I had instincts, but I had no baseline. And so at that point, that's when I became really, truly fascinated by the science of rhetoric. Communication has been around quite literally since man has been on Earth, and yet it's something that we all do and don't really understand what the components are. And when I dove into it, I started to see that things like the ancient Greeks, Plato, Socrates, Aristotle, you name it, these guys had spent decades figuring it out, talking about it, describing in many ways the best and the worst approaches. That's when I got good. And so then when it was like, what was my first gig? I don't even remember. I don't even know. But I can tell you that I've had a bunch since. Some have been better than others. There is certainly a range of my level of skill on any given day based on the sheer volume of exhaustion. But I know that when I mentally have myself in the right place, which is it's about them, man, oh man, do things go well.
That's cool. Because you're, it goes back to your nature as a giver, right? If you're a giver, then when you're on stage, it's not about what you're doing, it's about what they're getting, right? It's a whole different way of thinking about it. And so it's brilliant. So to that end, let me just transition a little bit. When you're working with a speaker, what's your process? Like, how do you get them to be skilled? Because they're not all coming from the same starting point.
Oh, they're certainly not. It's a lot of different steps for each individual. But I'll tell you that it starts with the simple notion that when it looks effortless, people notice. When it looks effortless, people notice.
Love that.
Of course, you know where this is going. That effort that people don't see, that's where it really counts. We have all witnessed presentations, sales pitches, professors, you name it, pastors, it doesn't really matter. We will see people struggle. And it's not fun. It's not fun to be a part of that audience. You might be pulling for them. We don't want to see people fail, but getting to that point of where it looks effortless is really where my work begins. So much of it is first and foremost around content. Quite literally yesterday, I had a new business opportunity, and the potential client was just obsessed with the notion of the deck. When do we work on the slide deck? And I said, you don't know. No, you got to get your content right. You got to get the story first. We'll design visuals to support it, but way late in the game, it's truly all about content. And to me, it's what my book is about. The first brick you lay, the number one thing you do, the way that you really engage your audience is to know what it is that you stand for, what your core beliefs are. Use that as the anchor for everything, and it just starts to fill in. It is amazing to me, though. I'm at the highest levels of people that I coach in the corporate entities of the world. Some of the biggest, baddest companies on the planet with almost unlimited budgets to get anyone in the world to come support them. And yet there is a defiance at times to do this stuff right. People really lean into what they've always done and aren't necessarily open to doing it the right way, which truly engages people. So my work is multifaceted, but it's often an uphill approach to get people to see that there's a better way.
And when you're dealing in corporate America, what is the pushback? Is it I don't see the value in it? Is it the value price equation? Is it I don't have the time? I don't care. I'm being made to do this. Like what's the big objection?
It's all of those, but it's none of those. I hear all of those all the time. Those are very much the way it's expressed. The truth is a much more insidious underlying beast. And that is that I really do believe this. And I've been at this for so long now that I really honestly feel like I have both an anecdotal answer, but I honestly feel I could provide some empirical evidence. I think people are afraid. I think people are afraid of being judged. And the same way that anyone that's listening or watching this podcast, you're immediately going to judge the way I look, the things I say, the clothes on my body. Like that's what we do. It's part of the equation, right? And in many ways, that's how it's always worked. We would judge people from the other town. Are they a friend or a foe? That's what we do. And in corporate America or Canada or anywhere, I think people are afraid of being judged poorly. And so what they do is they fall back on the safe. They fall back on the well-known, well-rutted road that includes things like, I'm going to give you all the data points. I'm not going to engage you with stories. I'm going to dull you to sleep, bore you to death with these horrific slides because it's safe. No one will judge me poorly if I do that. And that's the biggest impediment to success.
And so when you take somebody from, because let's say they all come at it from that place, and then you help coach them to, we'll call it magic, because sometimes magic happens.
Yeah.
What conversation happens from the time they started with, I would agree with you, the fear, and then when they experience the magic, what kind of conversations do they have with you after the fact?
Oh, I love this question. I've had some really amazing experiences. A lot of emotions that are sometimes old things. One of my favorites was a CEO and chairman of a many $billion a year, humongous financial service company that I absolutely know. Every single listener knows the brand. I'm not going to out him. He was a wreck. I mean, he cried in my arms like a baby. And it was one of those kind of things, is because he had gone for a number of decades at a very senior position and had never heard or seen what could be. No one had given him truth. And I think in some ways it's that thank you. Oh my goodness. I have seen a single presentation by a leader catapult their career. I have, for real, seeing people get promotions, money, titles, you name it, from just one opportunity to deliver the things that matter most in a way that truly moves people, it is real. And Plato said it. Plato said, those that tell the stories rule society. And whether it's people in your family, politicians, Hollywood stars, certainly business people, the Bezoses and Musks of the world, those that tell the stories rule. And when you can get it right, you can rule.
So let's talk a little bit, because I think it's kind of thematic. Your purpose is elevate people.
Yeah.
Tell me more about where you came up with that and how you came up with that.
Well, it's an interesting story, and I'll be as brief as possible. It really was born from COVID. My business suffered millions and millions of dollars, double-digit million-dollar contracts that went up in smoke when COVID hit. We make the majority, or traditionally made the majority of our money by producing events that brought people into one big room. That wasn't going to happen. And so all of a sudden, I was faced with the reality that the decades of work, the stuff I had poured myself into, had no value. People didn't want to buy what I was offering. And I found myself alone, and I'm in my office and at a big whiteboard and trying to figure out what was next on a Saturday morning. And what I recognized was not just the what I do or how I do it, but really clearly why. And the stuff that always motivated me, the stuff that always moved me, was putting people in a position to gain all of those amazing things, whether it's a title bump, salary, you name it. That's what always excited me the most. Giving people skills, giving them confidence, giving them all these things. And at the same time, what we often did was quite literally put them on a stage, elevate them in the room, or give them awards, salespeople at the end of the year. We would do all these things that lifted people up. And it was my buddy, Mike Walsh, great human being, who said to me something like, Brian, that's what you do for everyone all the time. He's like, that's what it's like at your house. That's what it's like on a phone call with you. It's what you do. And it just hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, yeah, that is. And then I just started to recognize that it is such a natural part of me. And I'll give you a silly example, but you'll know what I mean. I cannot help myself, Alan. If I see a homeless person or someone with a sign looking for money, I may not have $1 for that person, but I'm absolutely going to go out of my way to acknowledge them. How you doing? Are you staying warm? Everything okay? It's just saying you're a human and I see you. I love name tags. I drive my wife nuts at every restaurant or whatever. Someone's got a name tag on. I say, hey, Alan. And they look at me like, how do you know me? People love the sound of their own name. It makes them feel like they matter. Just, it's that. And that's what elevating people really is. It's about acknowledging that regardless of your station in life, I see you. I hear you. I don't care if you're green, purple, man, white, something in between. I acknowledge you. And you matter. That to me is what elevating people is all about.
Brian, when you speak about that, it's visceral. It's not words, right? It's just, it is who you are and how you live your life. And that transfer of emotion is what I sense your clients get from you. Would that be fair?
I hope so. I certainly know this. Not only will I be silent, I refuse to be complicit in those that lead with hate. I will always step up and say something in defense of anyone that's been marginalized. But I certainly lead from a marketing perspective of, if this sounds abhorrent to you, call someone else, because this is who I am and I'm not changing for you. You might have $100 million contract for me, but if it doesn't fit, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to stick to who I am. I know what I stand for, and it just is.
It's a great lesson for everybody to know that your stake in the ground is real clear with yourself and what you will do. So the decisions become so much easier, don't they?
They really do. This is silly sidebar. My wife and I we just got back from Hawaii, and we went to this little store that we had been before over a year ago. And I wanted to go back to this store, really cool little place called Hunter Gatherer. It's in Kauai. And we walked in and there's this print on the wall, framed, beautiful print. And I'm like, honey, I got to get that. And she's amazing. And she said, you're out of your mind. We're not buying that. I'm like, no, I got to get this. She's like, listen, we're living in a temporary rental. We've got like 50 pieces of framed art in a box in a storage unit. One, how are you going to get this home? Two, we already have too much. The answer is no. Well, I agree with her. I turn the corner and all of a sudden the same print is in a postcard size. That postcard, which of course I bought, it says, stay true. And it has this little arrow. Stay true. Now, I didn't write that. It is not a mantra that I'm purporting as my creation. But it hit me for real, has continued to hit me every single day when I see it. And it is so hard to stay true. It is so easy to fall off the path. But for me, I'm at a certain age. It's the only thing that I'm now proud of. I'm staying true. Like, this is who I am. Take it or leave it. If it affects relationships, and it has, then so be it. But I'm staying true. I'm going to choose love over hate all day, no matter what, just is.
Pretty hard to argue that. Not easy to live it, but pretty hard to not argue that it's the right path for humanity.
There are hundreds of millions of people in far-flung places around the world who disagree with me.
100%. Unfortunately, but that's okay.
Unfortunately.
What did Dale Carnegie say? Find people that believe what you believe.
That's it.
That's pretty simple, right? And then everybody else will welcome you into the tent, but
you know, exactly right. That's why we became friends so quick. And it was our core belief.
The transition for that, I remember the word, and I'll never forget it. When I met you in Montreal at a YPO event, you were talking about delighting customers.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Oh, for sure.
What does that mean in practice? Because we all talk about it, but what does it really mean in practice? Whether it's a speaking client or a corporate client, what does that mean to you? And what does that mean for all of us?
I honestly think it's easy. Going back to that notion of if it looks easy, we notice. When companies or individuals within an organization are wildly successful, we notice. And often it looks so easy. That one guy always he always is at the top of the sales team. Why is that? It's always the same person. He's so good at it. It looks so easy. Delighting your customers goes to the absolute heart of the stuff that I work, teach, speak about. It's really telling people that genuinely, authentically, they matter. I am of the belief that business is really quite easy and profitable if you can make your customers know that above all things, they matter. And if your employees, your associates, the people on your team, if they know they authentically, genuinely matter, suddenly business is easy. We're profitable and stuff just happens. Because we're all going to make mistakes. Things are going to not go exactly the way you want it to. But if you're my customer and you know without a shadow of a doubt that you deeply matter, you're going to keep coming back. And so the way to express that, to show what delight looks like, is to find both unique, creative, inexpensive, often ways to say you matter. This one I just did. It's not disingenuous. It's got to be real, right? A vendor of mine, a video editor, great guy. His wife had a really difficult delivery of their second child. He's my vendor. I know her. I've met her twice, but I sent her a note saying, handwritten note, US mail, stamp, the whole thing, that basically said, I hope you're feeling better. We sent a little gift to the baby, but I sent a thing to his wife. That's because I actually care. They very much matter to me. They are truly important people in my world, but it's a matter of keeping it on the radar of like, okay, how can I express gratitude? How can I showcase mattering? It's sometimes as simple as a note. That's what customer delight really looks like.
Back to not, flog the horse, but again, you're elevating people. You're elevating people in how you think about them. And, the other word that I'm learning from you here is that when people know they matter, they know you care. And when they know you care, then that they open up trust and all those good things that you and I have built over the last few years that happened so naturally, no effort, because it was consistent with each of our values. So it's really cool. Very cool.
It's along that line, and let's just use you and I as an example. How do you actually make customers feel like they matter and delight them? Listen, actually pay attention. It was not too many months ago that you were telling me about things like the marriages that were happening with your kids and all the stories. And it was like, all I had to do was listen. Mm-hmm. And so the next time we talked, or even via text, it was kind of like, how'd the wedding go? Yeah. It just shows that I care, that I paid attention. What does that cost? Literally nothing. And it's got to be, again, it's not a ploy. It's not some marketing scheme. It's if you actually care, then showcase it.
I love it. It's, you what I remember from the delight point. So I think as a human, you do that naturally but for the businesses, it's really an intentional process too. It's actually, right.
Truly, I'm working on one right now. This is so great. It's this guy, Matt, who I love, and he's always open to the most creative solution. He's got 30 people at an organization who don't know it yet, but they are getting a pizza oven, and it's like $350. It's nice, being shipped to their individual homes. Before that thing ever gets there, we built a whole kit. It goes inside a pizza box with a printed note on the inside that looks like a pizza. It's amazing. The copy is tremendous. The gift is tremendous. The way he's doing it is tremendous. He gets one deal, one from these 30 people. That thing is paid for times 2. I mean, it's just, you got to love that kind of stuff where people are willing to sort of put their money where their mouth is. Because again, he means it. He's all about relationships, but to be able to express in a really creative, unique fashion, man, it's awesome. Love that stuff.
You know what, again, I love listening because I learn is that in the old days, and I'm old, but in the old days, that's how we had to do things because we didn't have the expediency of digital.
You're right.
And now we use the expediency of digital as, well, I reached out to him or her. Mm-hmm. But no, you'd never connected with them. Ergo, which is you've got attention from someone and now you've connected with them in an authentic way. I think it's brilliant. It's a great lesson for all of us.
And again, it's got to be genuine. If you actually believe that making people know that they matter is important, you can do it very successfully in a digital environment. It's things like easy. Everyone knows this one, right? You can do a cold outreach. Would you be my LinkedIn friend? Or, Brian, I heard you on Alan's podcast, and when you talked about X, Y, and Z, I was totally intrigued. Would love to know more. Would you be my LinkedIn friend? Which one feels like I matter, right? It's really not that hard. You just have to understand how it works and then be genuine.
Love it. I love it. So I want to just transition to the last part of my last 2 questions. You've got a new direction in your speaking and what you're doing.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating. Can you share the theme of what you're doing? And
yeah, I appreciate you asking. I really do. It's a big deal to me as my business has changed because of COVID. I have no desire to go back to what was. I was certainly perhaps financially more successful, but I was far less the human that I would choose to be. And so I'm really excited. And I am now leading with the notion of I'm a speaker first, nothing I ever did before, but now it's my true desire to speak very frequently. And I'm talking about things like making it look effortless, making people know that they genuinely matter. And the way that I'm using, the way I'm telling that story is an analogy. And it goes to something that's a very big part of me. And that is I'm a ceramic artist. I'm a potter. I sit at a wheel with a lump of clay and hopefully turn it into something beautiful. My wife and I have both been doing this kind of stuff for over a decade now. And so the only visual that I bring on stage with me, no slides, no charts, no nothing. I bring a pottery wheel and I throw a piece and then I cut it in half right on the spot. And I talk about the various things that are really analogous from the world of pottery to the world of business and human beings. It is really something. The pressure is certainly on. I got to tell you that it's not easy. Standing on a stage and speaking is one thing. I can do that fairly comfortably, but sitting at a pottery wheel and hoping that a very fickle art piece comes together on the fly is a bit of a challenge. but it might be the most fun I've ever had. It's pretty great.
And the message on, you tell me about form and function and beauty, and can you just share a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing. It goes back to 1920. It's an art movement in Japan. It's called Menge, which is a crazy word, but it's essentially the idea that there is this duality of beauty and function. The example that I talk about in my speech is I show two bowls, one, a simple white bowl that we bought at Walmart, and a bowl that I made. They both have the same utility. They both have that same shape kind of and form, but one you feel. Hopefully the one that I made, right? And it's this notion from Menge that if you're going to build it, if you're going to do it, if you're going to have a functional piece, make it beautiful too, make it sing. And I believe deeply that business is beautiful when people know they matter, both customers and associates. That's the beauty in business. We do the functions all the time. We nail those. Look at the profitability of all these companies. We're killing it functionally, but we've missed the beauty. And so my desire is to elevate businesses and people in business by understanding that you can have that very effective duality of beauty as I define it and function. That's what my speech is really about. And I hope that people don't just hear it, I hope they do it. Making people matter will fix the ills that we see in the world today.
So if I were to wrap up our talk today, the word humanity is the word that just kicks me right in the where I live, because you are looking at making businesses human. You're looking at making human relationships connected and loving, and not to sound too idealistic, but what a happy place to be if businesses weren't worried about beating each other up, but having them both elevate themselves when they work together. And so this is exactly what I was expecting would come out of you, Brian. And I really appreciate you spending time with us. To go back to our original theme, being an original, you are an original. You're an original human, and I hope that your light gets shined on a lot of people today. And if people want to reach out to Brian, obviously Square Planet, just type it in. There's not a lot of Square Planets out there. You'll find Brian. And if you don't, reach out.
You know what? I'll give you a cheat. It's pretty easy. If anyone wants to shoot me an email, if you just go to info@squareplanet.com, it comes to me. So
you are the Square Planet.
I am info at easy peasy.
It's not too personal. You should go Brian, the loving man at Square Planet.
I mean, I want it to be simple for people.
Listen, man, this was fun. Thank you. And
thank you. Sincerely, I appreciate the opportunity to spend a few minutes and, yap about the stuff that matters most to me. I certainly wish for anyone that's watching / listening, issues, questions, concerns about anything I said, please do find me. I don't ever want to have monologues. I want to have conversations. And so if anyone wants to chat, I'm always up for it. I very deeply appreciate you as a human, but certainly as a business person. And thank you for the opportunity. You are the man, Alan.
It's my brother. We'll talk to you soon.
Cheers.